Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the third of the Fairfax County Economic Development Authority Innovation in Aerospace series. Today we're going to concentrate on defense. We've got a great lineup of speakers, and at the end of the planned session this morning, we will go into the Hoover app, which I'm hoping many of you will be on, where there'll be an opportunity to interact directly in rooms with those speakers. That you'll see a menu on the left-hand side of the screen where you can control all that sort of thing as we go through the presentation and in that bit at the end. I said hello rather than good morning, good afternoon, or whatever, because I know we've got attendees all around the world this morning. Lots of people in Northern Virginia, but I'm pleased to say lots in the UK and in Europe and Israel and India and really all over the place, which is very, very heartening to see. So I won't speak too much. Let's get going, and let me introduce the first speaker. So Colonel Nathan Diller is the director of AFWorks, which he will explain shortly. He has the sort of resume that makes us earthbound mortals feel slightly inadequate. He holds master's degrees from both Harvard and MIT. He's a pilot, started on F-16s, and then as a test pilot has flown just about everything pointy in the US inventory, and spent some time doing the same thing in France as well. He commanded the 586th Flight Test Squadron, and then has a technology background beyond that with the Air Force Scientific Advisory Board and DARPA, which fits him perfectly for the role he has now. So without further ado, I'll hand it over to Colonel Nathan Diller. Colonel.
Thanks so much, Ian, for the introduction, and thanks for the opportunity to speak to distinguished crowd that you have here, and welcome to all of the participants. Sounds literally around the world. It's an exciting time really in the innovation space, in the aerospace and defense sector. And so what I'd like to do is talk a little bit about the things that we're doing with AFWorks in a path to collaborate with the innovators out there across this broad ecosystem. Clearly in the Department of the Air Force, and for us, the Department of the Air Force means both our air and our space force. Here in AFWorks, I am currently situated in the Air Force Research Laboratory. So we are part of the Air Force Research Laboratory with AFWorks, where the Air Force Research Laboratory obviously is always been on the cutting edge of those aerospace defense technologies. And now as we're moving forward into a slightly different environment in aerospace defense, an environment where we're seeing over 80% of our research and development across the United States happening in the commercial sector, we have looked at a slightly different model, and not necessarily that we're getting rid of our old models, but we're looking at the potential of adding another tool in our toolkit of capability development. And so from AFWorks, we are focused very much on transitioning agile, affordable, and accelerated capabilities by partnering with that commercial sector, and by being able to bring our warfighters from both the Air Force, our airmen, and from the Space Force, our guardians, to this cooperative agreement, this partnership, in order to bring forward in a more accelerated manner these technologies. So I want to talk just a little bit about that approach that we're thinking about capability development. And it does take a slightly different phase of acquisitions than what we've done previously. But fundamentally, hopefully this opens the aperture a bit to you to find opportunities, whether you be in the United States or be in one of our partner countries, some of those opportunities to be able to partner with AFWorks and be able to partner in this new approach to capability development. So as we go through this, I want to just talk, for a moment about how we've done things traditionally. We clearly in the Department of the Air Force have some fantastic technologies. If you watch the Super Bowl just on Sunday, you get to see, decades of development across our bomber force in a fantastic flyby there. We have specialized in the new capability development across that, making sure that we're guaranteeing the safety and security of our vehicles. You probably didn't see a lot of people ducking or concerned about the fact that the Air Force was doing an overflight during the Super Bowl, because we have a long tradition of an ability to move forward with discipline, with some of the most advanced technologies, and bringing those advanced technologies to a place that can be used. One thing that we are looking at, though, is are there ways to accelerate that capability development process? As you know, those fantastic aircraft that flew over the Super Bowl, in many cases, took a decent amount of time to develop, in some cases decades. And while we continue to do development in that traditional manner, we're also looking at an alternative approach, right? So that traditional manner, we've got super partners in our defense industrial base, the large prime companies who have been developing these fantastic capabilities for us for years, and we continue to partner with them. What we found, though, over the last few years is a growing number, to some degree, specifically in aerospace defense, a growing number of companies that are engaging now in this, to some degree, software meets hardware, being able to accelerate some hardware development capabilities. And so you've got this growing technology base out there in some non-traditional partnerships. Besides that, you also have internal to the Air Force, what we were under AFWERX starting about 3 years ago, is a strong desire among our workforce, among our airmen and our guardians, to find these new technologies that are out there, to bring those new technologies into the workforce. Because in many cases, what we have found is that we go home and we have this Internet of Things that we connect to. When we go to work, that Internet of Things isn't quite to the same level of connectivity, may not be to the same level of sophistication as some of our capabilities that we have right now. And in many cases, there's good reason for that. In other cases, this maybe allows an opportunity for partnership with those super companies that are bringing ease to our daily life. Are there things that they can do to help us with our operational capabilities, to move with better speed, to move with lower cost than what we're doing today? And so the growth of that industrial base among non-traditional players, that growth of that network of innovators internal to our air and space force is key. However, if we do not have a path of taking those small ideas from our airmen and guardians, if we don't have a path of taking those small ideas from that entrepreneur and growing it into a big idea, bringing it across what we call the valley of death, what is a traditional acquisition process, then we leave a high risk of amazing capabilities sitting on the table that potentially never make it to market at all, or potentially never make it to our DoD market. And so in addition to what we've described as our AF ventures, this touch point to industry, and to spark this touch point to our entrepreneurs across the force, we have this third path in this third division that's called Prime. And the first of the efforts under Prime was Agility Prime. And so we'll get into more details on that. This Prime initiative is what we see as providing a variety of different paths to accelerate the ability of these technologies, along with these concepts, to go across this valley of death. And they call it a valley of death for a variety of reasons, right? This is where some would say good ideas go to die, because to get across this valley of death, as it's been described, requires some very complex activities. And they're complex because this is very, very important work that's being done. The work that is being done is taking treasure from the taxpayer and turning it into capability for our operators, should we find ourselves in a time of war. But frankly, too, it's capability that we use probably more often in times of peace through doing disaster response or humanitarian activities. So it is a very important task. And because it is an important task of turning that treasure into operational capability, there are a variety of checks and balances that happen. And some would say that over the course of the years, some of those checks and balances might have grown and might have created some roadblocks to being able to move forward quickly. Our challenge in AFWorks is to find ways of moving forward with speed, but doing it in a disciplined manner so that we're meeting those checks and balances. And so this is where, in some cases, just by bringing forward some 21st century digital tools, we might be able to move faster in the compliance, all the necessary compliance, but do it in a way that maybe actually provides even more rigor than our industrial approaches that we've taken of paper-based review, for example. Different approaches to our testing, different approaches to data collection, right? A world where we're collecting data at rates that were not possible. How do we make sure that we have an infrastructure to take advantage of that? New authorities that have been given to us for things like contracting, where we can create a better relationship with customers with different agreements or other transactional authorities that are out there to allow opportunity and more flexibility for that early collaboration to tailor more effectively the results that we're trying to get in these transactions. So a variety of different opportunities in this prime approach to bring forward the capabilities to go across that valley of death. And the key that we're also looking to use to unlock not just improved security through these new capabilities, but also an improved prosperity largely for our nation, because many of these nascent technologies, in some cases, are in need of, maybe a small market, and we create that initial market. They may be in need of some flavor of certification or some regulatory compliance, where if DoD works in conjunction with an interagency partner, that ability to meet the necessary compliance might be accelerated. And so that approach, that prime approach, I'll talk in more detail with our first prime. But at first, I want to kind of lay that groundwork of this new capability development, where we're looking at this idea of technology through AppVentures, talent through Spark, going to this transition approach through prime. Now, AppWorks has several locations around the country. We have a location here in the Washington, D.C. area, where I'm based out of. But we've also, over the course, we've got a place very close to our warfighting capability in the Las Vegas area. We are just establishing a relationship with DIU out in Silicon Valley to establish a hub out there. We have been in Austin, where, as you all know, there is a growing startup community. And we recently launched two really exciting hubs for us. One called Dayton Digital Works, where we're exploring some of those new tools to create digital threads for things like airworthiness, for things like decision analytics that allow us to accelerate our understanding, accelerate our learning, either about the safety or security of the vehicle, or perhaps accelerate our learning about the overall utility and cost across the full life cycle of a vehicle. So that Dayton Digital Works is an exciting new start for us. There's also a SpaceWorks hub. As I mentioned, Air Force Research Lab is one lab supporting two services. And so that SpaceWorks branch now creates a huge new opportunity for AFWorks to begin moving into the space world. And I'll talk a little bit about, in this new space arena where we're entering, some options that we're assessing regarding this prime effort, this space prime effort. I want to give you just a little bit more detail on that AppVentures program, because this is really, if you want to understand how to engage with AppWorks, many times from an industry perspective, AppVentures is that front door for industry. And so the purpose really of AppVentures is the ability to leverage this commercial technology, deliver better capability to our operators, and to do it faster, to think about how we might grow this 21st century industrial base. And so that approach has led to an interesting use of SBIRs, so the Small Business Innovation Research Program, as well as our Small Business Technology Transfer Program. The second of those actually provides a partnership between our research institutions and small businesses. But the idea behind both of these programs is the ability to accelerate the commercialization of research and development in small business. This is the idea that many of the greatest ideas out there come from that entrepreneur in a new business. But we don't want those ideas, sometimes those ideas need a little extra boost. And so the Small Business Administration, the Congress in 1982, created that extra boost through these programs. And we have started to leverage that program through AF Ventures. If you want to learn more, you can go to afworks.af.mil and look under the industry tab there to learn more about both the SBIR and the STTR programs. Solicitations are still open actually for one more week. So there's still an opportunity if you would like to apply to this next round of proposals. We have this approach for open topics, and this open topic approach really goes to a philosophy that, we're saying we don't have all the best ideas in the Department of Defense. We have some amazing ideas, but we also believe that by opening up those other ideas to the broader innovation ecosystem, there's an entrepreneur out there that says, I probably have a fantastic commercial capability, but that commercial capability might also be interesting to the Department of Defense. And so from that perspective, this gives an opportunity for you to propose unsolicited your ideas to DoD with a suggestion of how your particular technology might be used. And we get to look at this. We get to do some pairing of that particular technology, again, with that talent, with the idea that together we can transition that for commercialization. That commercialization could mean either revenue by selling the capability back to the Department of Defense, or it could mean revenue by a non-defense commercialization. So bringing it into the private sector, maybe for some other public use. As we've done this, this experiment in AF Ventures, we've awarded over $700 million. Of that $700 million, we've been able to bring on another $1.4 billion of additional government funding and another $2.2 billion of private follow-on funding. And so this is, we've awarded over 2,000 contracts under this construct, over 1,000 different companies. Some of them are proposing right to phase one and then to follow in phase two. Of those companies, over 1,000 of those companies are brand new to working with the Department of Defense under this SBIR program. So again, the idea for us is to partner, to create that partnership, to invest with you in that research and development together. And as we do that, what we are finding is that we are getting $5 of non-small business investment for every dollar that we are investing through those small business funds. And so we are doing everything we can to stretch that taxpayer dollar. But the idea that that taxpayer dollar is going to accelerate a capability for the country in another area is compelling, we think, moving forward. As I mentioned, the key to that is our workforce, our ability to reach back to the individuals across the Department of the Air Force to identify those technologies, right? Those 2,000 some contracts, and identify where does that fit? Is there a way that we can help grow a small market in the Department of the Air Force? Is there a way that through collaboration with the interagency, we can grow that maybe across the broader government? And then eventually, can we take those nascent technologies and help move them into the commercial world? So I want to talk now specifically about our first project under this prime approach called Agility Prime. So the purpose with this prime approach is to expand this technology transition path, to accelerate these emerging dual use technologies, leveraging, in some cases, our government resources with the idea that we can accelerate affordable capability to the field. And so this idea of co-investment, the idea that we're going to look across the spectrum of new technology, and that within 2 to 4 years, actually bring that new technology to the field. As we do that, we look at 7 different stakeholder approaches in that, and I'll talk to those. One of those is industry. The technology needs to actually exist out there and be something being pursued. The second is the investor. We have a thought that we want investors to help us co-invest because that reduces risk to the taxpayer dollar that we are spending out there. And it may help reduce risk overall to the investor. The next is close partnership with the interagency. And so with Agility Prime, This is our flying car program. We've worked closely with NASA, with the FAA, in collaboration to see where we collectively can become a more effective bureaucracy to bring new capability to the field. The next partnership is through international, and this is a case where, in many cases, there's technologies abroad that we may not have domestically. In other cases, we may have domestic capability that we would love to be able to share with our partners. And so that the international piece is one we're excited about building more effectively in 2021. Expect to see more opportunities there. The last three partnerships are internal to the Department of Defense. So one is with our laboratory and looking to identify those experts to ensure that technology is truly at the state of the art. The next is with our acquisition community, making sure that there are clear paths for meeting all those requirements so that we really can bring the capability to the field. And then the last, the technology really has to have a capability, has to provide value to our warfighter. So the first, as I said, was Agility Prime. With this Agility Prime, we see largely this third revolution in aerospace happening. This third revolution across three segments. One across propulsion, the second across controls, and the third across manufacturing. With that first revolution being, the reciprocating engine that allowed the Wright brothers to fly with a tube and fabric aircraft or wooden fabric aircraft, using controls, push-pull tubes and cables. As we move forward into the second revolution with the jet age, clearly a new propulsion system, new approaches to materials with aluminum or titanium, and hydraulic actuators being able to allow us to move at speeds and control large aircraft like we were before. In this third revolution, what we see is a new propulsion system, this idea of distributed electric propulsion, right? Your Tesla or your Prius, or name your favorite electric vehicle that's out there. That large propulsion system moving together with a control system where we've had microelectronics improving technologies for autonomy or for simplified vehicle operations. And then the last is manufacturing, looking at new approaches to being able to really do exciting things with composites, with advanced manufacturing. Why are we doing this? Well, because we feel like there's a strong need to build this industrial base. As I mentioned, we're creating new processes for accelerating getting to the field. And then lastly, we intend to field these capabilities in 2023 with over 20 different use cases under investigation across a variety of our major commands. And just over the last year since we conceived this program, we put over 20 companies into this air race to certification. We have completed airworthiness for one of those companies. You probably saw a press release yesterday for Joby Aviation and the work that we're doing with them. Several other companies coming quickly behind them. We've been able to co-invest, literally billions of dollars going into this market on technologies that are of interest to us and of interest to the commercial market. We are launching a new training program under our Air Education Training Command, understanding what these new pilots look like, what these new training maintainers look like, and what it might look like in the future to operate an autonomous system. And then we started delivering hardware. There was a press release just last week of a new vehicle that we delivered to Springfield, Ohio, with a fantastic partnership we've had there. That's just one of many partnerships with states and local communities that you'll be seeing over 2021. So with that, we are very excited about continuing these partnerships. These partnerships bring together new technology out there with you, the innovator, with you, the small business, with you, the large business that's focusing on new commercial opportunities, bringing together our talent internal to the Department of the Air Force, and ideally bringing these new capabilities, transitioning them for the prosperity and the security of our nation and that of our partners. So with that, I'll pause for any follow-on questions and thank you for your time.
Well, thank you, Colonel Diller. That was really fascinating, and I have many questions of my own, but I'm going to leave those because we've got a few coming in on Hoover and in the question area, and maybe if we can squeeze one of mine in at the end, I will do. So a question from someone on the Hoover platform. What are you looking at anything in the area of vertical flight at all? I guess you may be in the smaller
Absolutely. So vertical flight for us, and I should have been more explicit on that. So our Agility Prime program is all about vertical takeoff and landing aircraft,
Ah,
and non-traditional. So it is, as I mentioned, it's these large electrical power systems using distributed electric propulsion. The idea is anyone a pilot anywhere in airport, between the vertical takeoff and landing and what should be simplified vehicle operations, maybe autonomous vehicle operations into the future.
fantastic. Thank you. That actually does nicely wrap up one of the other questions, which was how those technologies fitted together. So thank you. And can you maybe tell us a little bit about the next Prime program? What sort of technology space are you looking at for the next one?
Absolutely. So we've looked and have said explicitly that we're going to launch a space prime. We have not yet established the date for that because we're, again, as I talked about, those 7 stakeholders. So space is certainly one. If you go to afworks.com, there's a place, if you look at our calendar of events, one of the tabs there's an opportunity for you to actually participate. We have a series of workshops over the next month, looking at space, looking at different options for autonomous operations, both from a mission perspective, but from a vehicle perspective as well. We had just yesterday our energy challenge, and we'll follow that up with more discussions about what an energy prime might look like, looking at novel generation, advanced storage opportunities, and alternative transport for energy. We have a vector prime looking at the growing market for commercial supersonic and potentially quiet supersonic, in some cases, hybrid propulsion and supersonic. We're examining opportunities for microelectronics for improved performance, ensuring that we have secure technology, in some cases, anti-tamper technology, as we look at the increasing criticality of microelectronics for things even like ground vehicles and autonomy with ground vehicles. And then the last, we're calling a digital prime or this game prime, but this idea of using more effectively digital engineering, digital acquisition to bring some of the fantastic tools of the IT revolution 20 years ago, now bringing that to hardware, to include things like modeling and simulation, looking at things like gaming, to understand, through logistics, what are alternative paths for accelerating. So those 6, besides Agility Prime, are 6 other areas we're under investigation. We've said we will move forward with space, but still looking to see what that partnership looks like for those other technological areas.
Thank you. Excellent. So I'll just remind the audience, I'm looking left and right. I've got Hoover questions coming in on one side. I've got Zoom questions coming in on the other, Heather. But I'll remind the audience as they're coming in, if anybody would like to put a question in either of the platforms, I will pick up on those. So which one shall we take next? Right, there's a very specific one here. I'm going to read this one out so that I don't get it wrong. Please, could you expand a little on your evolving interagency partnership with NASA, e.g. The AAM Air Cargo Airlift as a dual-use pathfinder?
Absolutely. NASA's been a fantastic partner. So I'll start maybe with one of the more novel approaches. This was actually seen in December. If you go to agilityprime.com, afworks.com, you'll see our Accelerate event. At that Accelerate event, we introduced this concept that we've been working with NASA on, this concept of using one of these electric vertical takeoff and landing aircraft, potentially for a lunar lander trainer. So that's one example, a bit of a novel example. I would say in other areas, we started last July this ecosystem development where we're looking at supply chain and how to create a more resilient supply chain. We've also been working with them on some of their UTM efforts. How do I manage traffic in the airspace, potentially congested airspace with these vehicles? And then another one is with model-based systems engineering. How do I start to understand and put into a digital space the different use cases that are out there and being able to optimize our understanding of those use cases with hardware available. So NASA's been just phenomenal for us. I'll say they had a lead start on all of this, and they've been very gracious to help us get up to speed in a relatively short amount of time.
Thank you. A more general one from somebody in the Zoom chat. You talk about these projects coming into our ventures and lots of things coming in through the SBIR route and so on. What sort of proportion of the proposal you get in on that open call do you actually proceed with? And I know it will vary massively, but what is the sort of funding level that you typically put against a project?
Yeah, great. So we really try to go in three phases. And I'll add that Prime is kind of a fourth phase. So the first phase is, it's to some degree I would say it's a dating exercise. It's a very small amount of funding, somewhere between $25,000 up to $150,000, depending on the proposal. That's a phase one. That allows the conversation to begin for a feasibility study. The phase two then can be somewhere between $750,000, maybe up to 3 million, depending on how you might sequence some of these. That's an initial assessment. Can there be solid development of research and development in this particular technology sector? We then have an opportunity for a follow-on phase two, where you can get up to $15 million. So a waiver granted to us by the Small Business Administration, up to $15 million of SBIR funding. That would then be matched by $15 million of government funding for what could be a $30 million contract. The caveat on that is that we are looking to co-invest. And so the idea is that $30 million of total government funding would be matched by investor funding as well, so that we're collaboratively working on the development of a common project. And then eventually, if we get several of those together, that then feeds into something like Agility Prime or those other Prime programs, where now we're moving into much larger contracting opportunities into a phase three SBIR.
Excellent, thank you. That's those are significant sums. That should allow technology to move nicely.
And I would say we've been able. The other point on that is we have exercised that and done that within a year, from that first $50,000 contract to a $30 million plus contract. And so speed is critical to what we're doing. But again, that discipline and making sure we're getting those best technologies is also critical.
Thank you. I'm going to try and wrap two or three of the questions together that I've got here, one of which actually very much mirrors one of mine, so that's pleasing. But I'm going to ask you to try and answer reasonably briefly if you can, because I'm getting also notes that we've got a few minutes remaining. So you mentioned that you would be coming back to international efforts at some point. I'm the UK rep for the Fairfax County EDA, so naturally I meet a lot of companies, and I'm conscious there's quite a lot of people, small businesses, I'm sure around the world, but the ones I know tend to be in the UK, who are doing really innovative things around space and around particularly low Earth orbit sensing, things like that. So for an international company who can't engage through the SBIR route, because SBIR it tends to be US only, how would you suggest that sort of company that has innovative ideas comes and engages with AFWorks?
Sure. So we've had a international space pitch day. We're going to look at opportunities for more of those pitch days. We've established several collaborative these CRADAs, these research and development agreements. Those are things that we have established right now. We have, because we are with the Air Force Research Laboratory now, a variety of different opportunities through our international offices across. So I would say one opportunity would be to participate in these upcoming Prime events. If it's a particular sector associated with those primes, so go to afworks.com, look at those primes in particular, and then if you're interested in particulars, there's also opportunity to submit ideas there, and keep an eye out for some of these follow-on international pitch days. We did our energy challenge just yesterday. Those challenges are typically open up to international companies as well.
That's brilliant. Thank you very much indeed. I apologize to the folks in the Q&A who I didn't actually manage to get to there. Colonel Diller, I believe you're going to stay with us for a few minutes on the chat at the end of the Hoover platform.
That's my intent, yes.
Excellent, thank you very much. So I'd encourage anybody else who has a question that I didn't get to. Apologies I didn't get to you, but please do join the Hoover chat afterwards and engage Colonel Diller there. may I say thank you very much. That was an excellent presentation, and thank you very much for answering those questions.
Super. Thank you.
Now we move on. So the next session we've got is looking at a number of companies with really innovative technology solutions in the defense environment. I'm going to hand over to Dan Wasserly from Janes. He's the editor of Janes International Defense Review. He's a published author on, I believe the book's called The 300 on the missile defenders, missile defense community. And I will ask Dan to introduce the panel for defense innovation. Dan.
Right, well, thank you very much for that. I'm Dan Wasserly. I'm the editor of Janes International Defense Review and the Washington Bureau Chief for Janes, and I'll be moderating our technology panel today. We'll start by introducing our panelists who have some brief video overviews that we'll share, and then we'll jump right into Q&A and try and leave as much time as we can for that. But with that, we'll start off with Ted Bowles, CEO of Israel Aerospace Industries, IAI North America. So Ted, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, and hello everybody. Like I said, I'm Ted Bowles. I'm the president and CEO of IAI North America, and we operate on behalf of our parent company, IAI in Israel, which is what the video will highlight. So with that.
Great, thanks, Ted. Next, we'll go to Josh Nadwicki, Vice President for Strategy and Planning at BAE Systems. So Josh, turn it over to you.
Thanks, Dan. Good morning, everybody. Josh Nadwicki. I run strategy for our electronic systems business in the US, about a $6 billion business. And the video you're about to see is our vision for the future of electronic warfare.
It looks like this video, we're having some technical difficulties, so we'll move forward without the videos. I'll turn it back to you, panelists.
Okay, next then we'll introduce Scott Herman, Chief Solutions Architect at Black Sky. So even without your video, Scott, you could introduce yourself.
Okay, great. Hi, everybody. I'm Scott Herman with Black Sky, and we're a global monitoring company based here in Fairfax County. We monitor activities and facilities worldwide, and we do that using our growing constellation of satellites, as well as our AI-powered analytics platform, and that gives our users a first-to-know advantage.
Oh, great. And Matt, we'll move over to you. Matt McCrann is Vice President of Sales at Drone Shield.
Yes, I'm Matt McCrann, Vice President of Drone Shield. Drone Shield is a developer of counter UAS solutions, both drone detection and mitigation, tailored for specific mission sets and use cases.
Okay, great. So we'll just jump right into the Q&A then. And I'd encourage folks online to use the Zoom Q&A function to enter whatever questions you may have. But just to start us off, I'd like to try and dive a little bit more into what new technology each of you folks are focused on in the near term. So we can go into sort of the longer term future tech later as well. But for now, things like AI, machine learning come up often, right? It's buzzwords at this point. But how does that translate on board military equipment where you have less computing power, less time, more difficult communications? There's just more challenges there. And I think, Matt, maybe we could start with you. As I saw earlier this week, right, Drone Shield had announced a big rollout of machine learning and AI software to customers, right?
Yeah, that's right. So we are incorporating AI in our detection-based algorithms now. And what we'll continue to focus on in the near term is automatic threat assessment based on those algorithms. And then also early stage fusing of different algorithms for a higher degree of confidence, threat assessment, automating a lot of the process that's being done by analysts now manually within our space. So reducing that cognitive burden, incorporating and leveraging AI to have more automated capability.
Okay, great. And just sort of moving down, Ted, did you have anything to add for IAI?
I guess what I would add to that, as you saw in the video, IAI has across the spectrum in terms of technologies and platforms that they deal in. One that is very much in the news is the automated battle management, linking many sensors, many platforms together. IAI has been doing that with the Israeli Defense Forces for about 20 years of linking platforms together, sharing information, and that naturally leads into applying AI and different tools such as that to get better use of the data and better use of the systems you have out there. So again, all the technologies are at play, but that's probably the one that we here in the U.S. are focusing most on, getting that capability introduced into the market here.
And Josh, how about on your side?
Sure. So, you brought up a good point. One of the things in AI is, it's kind of ubiquitous in the commercial world now. And a big enabler is massive computing power and large amounts of data that you can use to train and learn. And one of the things we've been doing at BAE Systems through our Fast Labs R&D organization in partnership with DARPA is investing in AI technologies that are at the tactical edge close to the sensor. And so we've got several efforts ongoing now where we're transitioning that capability. In the electronic warfare space, as an example, in the past, radar threats were very fixed. They were analog-based systems that were, very fixed, and their characteristics didn't change over time. So you could design a solution that would detect a certain fingerprint of that radar, and you could use that to employ a countermeasure. Nowadays, technology is evolving so fast, it's all digitized. Those signals can be changing real time. And so in the EW space, AI allows us to learn the environment in real time, try different EW techniques, learn which ones are effective, and then train those systems in real time to remember that as the mission's progressing and through each sortie. So that's one example of where we're taking AI in the electronic warfare space, Dan.
And Scott, how about on your end for Black Sky?
Yeah, so machine learning and AI, and particularly around computer vision techniques, is very much at the heart of what we do. I want to get to the part of your question about what's on board and what's not. And we're always looking at that balance. Since we run satellites, what processing do we have on board the satellites versus what processing do we have on the ground? And there's a lot of trade-offs there. On the ground, you've got massive computer power. You've got the ability to innovate very rapidly. You've got the scalability. But doing things on board also gives you some advantages in terms of, very quick latency and resiliency, the ability to look at an observation in space and then quickly react to it in terms of tipping and queuing. So we're looking at those trade-offs all the time. And in general, we are applying some AI techniques in limited amounts in terms of payload. We're doing a lot on the ground in terms of bringing in millions of observations and kind of sorting through those, scoring them, evaluating them, classifying, detecting objects in them, and then generating our intelligence reports from that.
Okay, great. And just as we had some issues with the video earlier, if anyone wants to see those videos, they'll be available on the Whova platform that you can check out after the panel. So that they'll all be residing there for the near future. But while we wait a few more audience questions here, so a lot of that, the things that you folks are working on, sounds like it pulls in a bit to, we hear all domain operations or multi-domain operations or JADC2 or whatever different acronym a different service calls it. But generally, I'd be curious to hear remarks on where you think industry's role here should be, as you see the US DoD really trying to tie all the different services together. How can you, on industry, help connect and flow information from one services platforms to a different services platform that itself is different, right? So it's really connecting apples and oranges, and the apples are owned by someone different. So it's a tricky one, but big thing for DoD here, right? So maybe Ted, if you could kick off, that would be great.
Sure. I think it's pretty easy to connect disparate sensors and systems through some type of a network to share information. The challenge for industry is to not make that proprietary so that you can't have other industries, other partners join into it. We have Link 16 as an example for if people want to use their reach back clock. I'm sure it started as a proprietary waveform and network, but now anybody can build a box that connects into a Link 16 network. And so the challenge for industry is not how to take all these multiple data sources and link them together. The technology has moved forward to allow that to happen in networks and such. It is doing it in a fashion that it isn't proprietary, that the network is open and other people can bring capability to it. Just like we were talking AI, if I have an AI engine, I want to be able to plug it into the data feed and process the data. I don't want to have to go through a proprietary network to go do that. And the other side of that coin is open systems. At least the Air Force, and I think DoD in general, was very much about open systems where you don't get locked into a protocol, an operating system that locks you in and may not evolve as fast as the technology. AFWorks is about, as we heard, grabbing whatever the latest commercial technology is and putting it into the US, into the DoD. That requires open systems to be able to do that. So I think the two challenges and maybe two opportunities for industry is both non-proprietary and open systems.
Does anyone else want to jump in there?
Sure, I'll comment. I think when you think of joint all domain operations, it all stems from shifting to the near peer threat with competitor nations. About 3 years ago, I was at PACOM, and it was right around the time Admiral Harris started pushing multi-domain operations, and this idea that to go after those near peer threats, you can't just have one platform and one service, that they have to coordinate with each other to actually have an effect. What we're seeing at BAE Systems, and where we're putting a lot of energy around that space, is around combining mission planning with real-time autonomy. And in the past, the way we solved a mission set is we have everything very platform centric. We've got a bomber to deliver weapons to a certain location. We've got a strike package. Now where things are going is to operate in that environment, you have to coordinate distributed heterogeneous platforms, optimize what sensors, what weapons they're employing when, and what their routes look like. And you have to do that in a distributed way. So an area we're focusing on is real-time mission management and autonomy combined with mission planning. And that's something that, you have to do, like Ted said, has to be in an open architecture kind of environment, because you're dealing with control of multiple third-party sensors, multiple third-party, platform interfaces. And I think that's a big focus as we move into this, near peer threat environment.
Okay.
I'd like to add something too, Dan, from a smaller company perspective. We're bringing capabilities to the warfighter, and it's important. We talked about open architectures and then leveraging some of the common links like Link 16. But it's an important consideration from a provider perspective or industry perspective that when you're developing these capabilities, to include common interfaces, because that's the key to interoperability, is being able to speak the same language at some level. So being able to, maybe it's not a tight integration and it's not all on one pane of glass, which is ideal, but the initial integration hurdle needs to be at least passing the value or the output of your capability to a screen, window, or system that the warfighter already has in their mission set.
Yeah, Dan, and what I would add to that, as a commercial entity offering products and services to the defense and intelligence community, and not coming from a more traditional, defense contractor background, I think commercial entities have to understand that part of their responsibility is knowing that they're going to have to live within a very complex ecosystem, and they have to fit within that. They can't just be another stovepipe. And that goes beyond just technical integration. I think a lot of interoperability discussions get into formats and standards and APIs, but you also have to understand ConOps and tradecraft and workflows, how analysts do their work, how operators do their work, and how does your commercial service play in that? What happens in terms of security constraints, for example, or operational security? How does it play nicely with other concepts and systems that are out there? So interoperability is a lot more than just technical integration. It's really understanding how you're going to work within the kind of the business use cases of the defense and intelligence community.
Yes, that's an interesting point, and it kind of leads into one of the questions I had was basically every new program as DoD focuses on digital transformation, they call it open architecture, modularity. Those are the words you hear with every new program that comes out, and very important to add smaller companies and larger companies. You keep your industrial base pretty mixed there. So how, as primes, do you plan for that? How do you work that into your designs, that whatever we're designing now has to fit into with whatever everyone else is designing? How does that figure into the design process? I'll leave that for whoever wants to.
Yeah, I'll speak. I mean, I think, Matt, you said it as the idea of open architecture enabling small companies to bring technology innovation to field and theater without having to have that entire infrastructure in place, I think is important for the future fight, getting capability faster. The Colonel talked about it earlier, a lot of the efforts working with SIBRs to try to, rapidly take technology and integrate it. For BAE Systems, we certainly embrace that as a sensor provider and electronics provider. By making your systems open, you can allow that rapid adoption of new tech and enable small businesses to succeed and create capability faster for the warfighter. 2 years ago, I was actually one of our sensor technologies we were deploying operationally, and I had the privilege of going overseas on a deployment with some of our service members and engineers. And we had a software-defined sensor in theater. The signal environment was a little different than what was spec'd. The team was able to, take that recording, send it back to our New Hampshire office, analyze it. We had a third-party software vendor who developed the algorithm for that piece of the system, make a change, and then integrate that back in. And, by the next day, the next sortie, that bug was fixed. So there's this third-party integration of, other capability, but also this rapid, DevOps environment that lets you update capability a lot faster when you need it.
I believe that we've wrestled with this for a long time, for decades. I mean, when I was in the service, we were wrestling with it, and it boils down, as Matt said, standards and interfaces that everybody understands. And I believe it's one of the challenges of the JADC2 AVMS. It's easy to take select sensors and link them together and have them share data and do analytics. But when you want to bring in new ideas, you have to be able to share what those protocols, what that interface is. Probably the easiest analogy is the internet. To get into the internet, it has ISP protocols, and it's all pretty much standardized. So you can write an app, program to get into the internet. And again, that's what the challenges of this whole JADC2 is, to be able to get the power to rapidly bring on capability. Those standards have to be published and accessible so that anybody, big or small, can share data and bring capability to it, to the solution.
Yeah, as a small commercial entity, it can be really challenging to get involved with systems of record and large procurements, and not get left with just table scraps from the large systems integrators. What we found to be really useful at Black Sky is the ability to get into Pathfinder, prototyping, concept, programs run by organizations like AFWorks and DIU and IARPA, getting out to exercises and operations and really being able to see how can these new emerging capabilities really integrate with what the landscape already is. It's kind of what I was talking about before, where integration is more than just, yes, I can technically integrate. It's, can I fit within the rules of engagement, the concept of operation that's already there, and still add value with new commercial services, new emerging technologies, new emerging capabilities that add to the mission, but being able to add that as a small company. And then that can grow into involvement in systems of records and larger procurements, but we've really gotten a lot of traction out of a lot of these Pathfinder programs and using procurement vehicles like SBIRs.
Yeah, and I'll just add to that. There's a benefit of identifying a couple of things up front with bringing your capability to the party, so to speak. It's essentially understanding what it is the warfighter wants as a result or an output from your system, where they want to see it, and then how and when they want to access it, and then building flexibility or adaptability around those areas. And then also we mentioned interoperability in the common interfaces. That's a key part that allows for that kind of flexibility.
And just to follow up there, because this seems to come up a lot. You mentioned that the SBIRs is a good vehicle, and anything now that falls under the other transaction authority agreement seems to be a pretty common use for getting tech out there quicker. Is that something that folks are beginning to lean on a lot more in the industry, like seeing OTAs and that being a real driver, or where do you see that falling?
I think industry is looking towards that, because that's the way the department's going. There's a lot more OTAs. I mean, a lot of what AFWorks does, DARPA and all that, to bring on technologies rapidly. OTAs is the preferred method. I think the traditional ways of procurements are still going to be there for the larger, more sustaining programs, if you will. But a lot of this technology, rapid technology, innovation, incorporation, playing around with is probably OTAs. And so industry certainly is, I know we are, looking to those as a way to introduce capability.
Yeah, I'd say I agree with Ted. At BAE Systems, we certainly are embracing OTAs. They are not a fad, right? There was a lot of talk early on that, oh, this is some new fad. We're going to see how long. No way, man. This is, I was looking at data the other day. The increase, I forget the numbers, but it's, orders of magnitude increase over the last few years in OTAs. And I think as a large, electronics prime, for us, you have to see it as a way to rapidly get capability in to theater and tested, but it does change the business model equation, because it's easy to invest a whole bunch of money in a program of record that if you land it, you got this 30-year tail. And these OTAs, it's very dynamic, and so it does change a little bit of the calculus in industry, whether it's a big company or small, that I think everybody is starting to kind of figure out and learn how to leverage better.
Yeah, and I'd say the OTAs provide some unique advantages for companies, especially non-traditionals or ones like our Five Eyes partners that don't readily have access to the SBIR avenue. So OTAs provide that alternative. And then like Josh was saying, as far as you just need to consider up front that this is a different contract vehicle, this is a different animal. It's not a 5 or 10-year IDIQ. So it's not meant to be used as a replacement for that, but more of an enhancement for rapidly developing capabilities.
And starting to get a couple of Q&A things in here. So considering the potential threat vectors of an open architecture, how much utility does zero trust architecture have, if any? So obviously, once you have an open architecture, you introduce a little bit of risk. So anybody like to dive in on that one?
I guess I'd say moving forward everywhere, cyber resiliency, program protection, anti-tamper is like table stakes. And so there's definitely, the answer is a lot of energy has to be put into making those systems secure. And the more open you are and the more standard interfaces you are, it does create the potential for more threat vectors. But it drives you to architectures that have to mitigate that. It is absolute table stakes these days. The maturity of cyber technology, you see it in the news everywhere. The attacks that are taken every day on our IT networks, never mind our weapon systems, right? So, and you got to deal with that even in the supply chain, right? And so there's a big focus right now in the microelectronics space around how do we become less dependent on offshore microelectronics foundries and get more onshore capability. And one of those reasons is, mitigating that risk.
Yeah, I would comment on the zero trust. Even as a commercial entity, we assume, we know that we are constantly under attack by fairly sophisticated actors. And therefore we just, we have to design that into everything that we do. It's not only because we're working with defense and intelligence customers who levy a lot of cybersecurity and operational security requirements on us, but because as a technology company that's working with emerging tech and emerging capabilities, we're a hot target, and it's not just the script kiddies in the basements, right? It's sophisticated actors. So we have to assume that in everything that we do, whether it's data at rest, data in motion, communications with our satellites, where we get data from, or even things like our use of open source, development assets, open source libraries. We have to take some extra steps in terms of, do we trust the cathedral versus the bazaar of open source? What does that really mean in terms of injection vectors? And certainly there's been a lot in the news lately about how those kind of software components have been an injection vector for bad actors. So yeah, zero trust is pretty much what we do. We think about it all the time in terms of how do we build a commercially viable and economically viable service, but that has well above what you might consider commercial best practices for cybersecurity and operational security.
I'll add, it used to be an afterthought, cybersecurity for IT or, software intensive systems. And then it came on par probably that it was designed in. And given the move to connect everything together, the Internet of Things, sharing all this data, it has to be priority one. It's like Joshua said, table stakes. You have to do more than design it in, because you open yourself up, the network has opened itself up to everything. It's one thing if somebody could hack into a standalone system and it took it down. But now you're talking about an entire network of sensors and platforms that are accessible. So the importance of it is now probably the priority in any networking system, any JADC2 kind of approach.
And then we have another security themed question here. Do you think you will be able to merge critical and non-critical data flow on the same hardware network? As there are a lot of questions in terms of safety and security. So a bit of a hardware software question there. Anyone can jump in on that.
You probably could, but it kind of goes back to the previous question. I think you have to step back and think about, am I introducing a threat or a vulnerability? And then how do you, if you're willing to accept the risk, in some cases, the risk that you're willing to open up, the reward is greater. But to that question, you have to have that. You got to have that analysis, that thinking before you go down that path. Do I want to introduce this vulnerability or not get the capability and preclude the vulnerability?
Anyone else want to weigh in, or tricky one?
I don't know that I have a good answer. So.
All right. Well, unsurprisingly, we've got a couple of AI questions to bring us back around here. Any innovation investments or products with substantial AI content that are developed without government funding, so on your own corporate dime?
So for us, I would say it's actually a mix of 3 funding sources. So we've captured at BAE and leveraged DARPA as one major investment, where we're kind of working with the services and our product customers to bridge the gap between the demand and the technology. So that's one angle. The second angle is a significant amount of internal R&D investment in that space. The third is there's a lot of open source AI technology in the commercial space that's out there. And what we're seeing in some of our efforts is the ability to leverage those core algorithms into a defense product. So now the art is in how you repurpose that code base for an application it wasn't intended for. You could take Google TensorFlow, for example, as a open source AI engine. How do you take those commercially available tools and recast them into a weapon system or military application to mitigate the investment demands?
Yeah, I'd have to agree with Josh on that. And then, so speaking from our standpoint, we do a significant amount of IRAD, so internal R&D work. And most of it, we do have a mix of funding similar to like these accelerators that are out there, and then also investment from US DoD, and then also the Australian Defence Force has worked with us closely in the past. But usually it's at a TRL like 3 or 4 level, where you've developed a basic proof of concept and a capability, and it speaks directly to a gap in capabilities that the force has currently. So it's trying to find that, I won't call it product market fit, but similar at an earlier stage. That's where we're seeing it transition from, an internal funded project to potentially having a collaborator on the military side of the house.
Yeah, I would say as a pure play commercial provider, even though we're working with defense and intelligence, the vast bulk of the investment in AI within BlackSky is self-funded. We're building commercial products and services and amortizing our research and development and our product development costs through those engagements with customers. I talked a little while ago about some of the Pathfinder projects. Those help us validate, those help us experiment, and then they feed into our product roadmap. But we're not doing build to order. We are a commercial services company, so all of our AI is really self-funded.
I guess I would just round out the discussion. Ours is internal, but much like Josh kind of talked about, external or commercially available tools are certainly in the mix of what you go use, but the application is internal, the application development.
The other thing I'd add to this discussion as we're talking here is, you know, I used to run a part of our R&D business. And one of the things we found is you have AI subject matter experts that know the math and science. And then you have, you know, mission experts that understand the application. And what we found is you need both. But if you don't have the mission expertise, it's like, you know, you've got a great hammer and you're trying to teach someone how to be a carpenter. And I'd rather have a carpenter teach you how to use a new hammer. And so we found that, you know, marrying those things together, but really leveraging, you know, the art in how you stitch that mission understanding and that capability understanding into leveraging that new tool is a big way to make that successful.
Yeah, I'd have to second that, Josh. It's what we see a lot in the when we talk about innovation is cool capabilities that are looking for a problem as opposed to flipping it and working with those mission experts to identify the problem worth solving and then bringing what's commercially available to that effort. So,
yeah.
Okay, great. We just have a few minutes remaining here. So one of our last questions dovetails nicely with one of the things I was hoping we could wrap up with, which is sort of like a crystal ball look at where you see your sector of the defense world 5-10 years from now. What would be the defining element, technological wizardry that might change where you are? So Ted, if we start with you and then we'll go clockwise.
Sure. I think crystal ball is always a dangerous place to go, but from my sense, you're seeing you're probably seeing a drift away from larger platforms. That's not to say that they're going to go away. Things like smaller UAVs, smaller platforms that are better integrated, so that by sharing information, they get the benefit of a larger platform. So no longer do I need to develop a excuse me, a B2 with a great radar. I can have a unmanned delivery system that's relied on the network, satellites, ground systems and such to get to the same capability that it needs. So that integration that we've been talking about, and then there's going to be a measure of AI in there that comes with the how much are you willing to let the machine do autonomously, and how much does the man in the loop, the person in the loop, still need to be involved in. So I guess in a nutshell, my crystal ball says lots more smaller things out there, better integrated with machine learning helping in that integration.
Okay, Matt, how about on your end?
yeah, sure. So specifically, Drone Shield plays very much in a counter capability space. From a high level, what needs to happen, and I can't tell you where we'll be in 10 years, but I can tell you the direction we're running today, is getting ahead of that. Counter by nature is a very reactive position to be in. You're constantly looking at the threat space and then trying to adapt to it. Whereas we're getting ahead of that now and trying to stay ahead by not necessarily focusing on the threats that pop up, but understanding the underlying commercial capabilities and technologies that these threats are leveraging and could potentially leverage, and then developing solutions alongside the commercial development, because our space moves very quickly. And I think as the Colonel said earlier, that about 80% of the innovation is being seen coming from the commercial sector. So it moves rapidly, and we have to develop alongside and move rapidly as well.
Okay, Scott, how about on your end there?
Well, I think we're at a really interesting nexus point right now where several different revolutions are kind of crashing into each other. We've got what's happening in new space in terms of lots of companies and capabilities that are getting on orbit, small satellites, what's happening with more frequent and cost-effective launch. You've got the revolution in compute power and what that means for things like analytics and cloud computing and machine learning and artificial intelligence. You've got what's happening in terms of the entire world as a set of sensors, and taking observations not only from space but from the ground, even your cell phones. How do you mix all that together and really, rather than that being a forensic activity, let's get a bunch of data and sift through it. How do we turn that into the kind of courses of action that support our warfighting community, right? How do we make it not about mapping and historical analysis, but into monitoring and being able to react to that very, very quickly? And how do these new technologies apply? And how do new procurement methods, how do these new companies get involved in those kind of problems?
Okay, and Josh, you have about 30 seconds to bring us home.
Sure. So a lot of good inputs from the team already. I guess the angle I'd take is a key area is in electromagnetic spectrum dominance. When you look at the boom in the telecom industry and the amount of RF stuff that's commercially available, you look at the amount of investment Russia's making in EW technology. As Ted said, systems are getting smaller and more distributed, and that is a huge enabler, but it puts a lot more reliance and premium on electromagnetic spectrum. And I see, now and in the next 5 to 10 years, a major focus on making our systems resilient to jamming, robust in those environments, and offensive capabilities to deny the adversary's use of that same spectrum is a key focus area for the DoD in our mind.
Okay, great. Well, thank you all so much. It's great stuff, everybody. And we're just out of time. But I'd like to remind audience they can network with these folks later around 10:30-ish on the Whova app. And with that, I'll turn you all back over to Ian.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, Dan, and thank you to all your panelists there. That was fascinating. We have a final speaker, but before we turn to him, he's from L3Harris. Before we turn to him, I believe the Fairfax EDA Techno elves have been hard at work in the background, and we may possibly be able to get the L3Harris video to run. Thank you. Thank you. It worked. Perfect. So let me introduce our final speaker, who, Ted, I think you might have an open microphone if you, there we are, get you from the screen. So our final speaker is Mr. Nathan Merritt from L3Harris, as you just saw in that video. Nathan holds an MS in Engineering Management and has spent 16 years working some fascinating programs, airborne laser, B2 uplifts, multi-intelligence mission systems. I think if I read the two bios accurately, Nathan was probably working B2 uplift programs at the same time that Colonel Diller our first speaker was actually test flying them. So there may even be a linkage across the panel here. He's an expert in ISR systems and currently leads international business development for L3 Harris reconnaissance mission systems. Nathan, take it away.
Great. Thank you, Ian. And thanks to the Fairfax County Economic Development Authority for this opportunity to participate in the Air and Space Innovation Series and to discuss today the integration mission solutions for the next fight. So with that being said, if you wouldn't mind going to the next slide, please. Virginia is home to many L3 Harris technology programs that address unique challenges our customers face in extreme operating environments across all domains. Very similar to the domains that the panelists just described. Some programs, to name a few, that are in those Virginia areas include advanced anti-submarine warfare, shipboard command and control systems that integrate sensor, navigation, and tactical communications information to provide enhanced situational awareness, and in-house tactical unmanned aircraft system capabilities, including the full design build spectrum. That's rapid development and prototyping, system engineering and platform integration, field testing, manufacturing, and logistics support. Next slide, please. So L3 Harris. L3 Harris is a global aerospace and defense technology innovator, delivering end-to-end solutions that meet the customer's mission-critical needs. Now at L3 Harris, we anticipate and mitigate risks with end-to-end solutions that meet our customers' mission-critical needs across air, land, sea, space, and cyber domains, from actionable intelligence to spectrum superiority. Every day, we design and build systems that safeguard our world and deliver warfighter effective solutions. And as you can kind of see here, there is definitely quite a few cadre of capabilities. I don't know if this group or panel are familiar, but we just recently, I believe last year, merged with Harris. So it was L3 Technologies and Harris. And through that, you can see the amount of capabilities that we are now able to align and bring to bear to support that customer and those warfighters across the globe. Next slide, please. So, where do I start to describe one, integrated mission systems, and two, the next fight? So what better than a very complicated operational view? As you know, this is where we are going. Today's fight is getting more complex, and as you can see in this OV of a near-peer adversary in a denied environment, you can see the required connectivity is vast. You have connections, both data, comms, sensing, etc. And you need to have all of that in your situation awareness in near real time to be the most effective and keep your forces safe. So you can imagine with this what the next fight could look like. And because of this, and in order for the mission systems to keep up, they will need to be platform agnostic and data centric. So those are interesting words. So what does that mean? That means that you will need technology that can be moved from one platform to another in a plug-and-play fashion with connectivity to a common enterprise data fabric, like the panel discussed earlier. That is a lot easier said than done. However, industry is currently ramping up to address these challenges. Next slide, please. So as our adversary defense rings increase, as you kind of see here, not only will the mission system hardware and software infrastructure be essential, but you will need to be able to achieve your mission inside various denied environments with this passive sensing at range. The mission systems we are discussing here would be located in all of those permissive, contested, and highly contested environments, which will require many platforms to employ this technology, whether it's a large strategic B707 airframe to a tactical edge attritable, or even an air-launched effect, or ALE. Next slide, please. So, how do you do this? How do you develop mission systems that are platform agnostic and data centric? Well, my friends, it's practice. We at L3 Harris have over 69 years of experience in scaled mission systems to fit a cadre of platforms that each required a specific data enterprise solution. Some of these platforms include, as you see on the left here, the RC-135 rib joint platform, The compass call in both the legacy incantation of the C-130 and the next generation on the G550 platforms, the E4B senior leader comms, and also the current leading SIGINT solutions that are employed on platforms like the MQ-9 and the U-2, for example. With this lineage and government partnership comes investment in analysis, test, and data infrastructure. And when you put this expertise into keeping what worked, scaled mission system architectures, and improving what didn't, disparate data enterprises, you have a roadmap to something special. Next slide, please. So leveraging our ongoing organic investment, or R&D, coupled with government partnership, like what Colonel Diller mentioned before, L3 Harris Recon Mission Systems has been able to crack the nut on sensor data and integration. Yep, I'm going to use buzzwords here, like open mission systems, multi-intelligence or multi-int, and joint all-domain. Now, this includes scaled mission solutions. And again, the example that you see here is in the SIGINT domain that fuses or cross-cues to the combined other sensors to include full mission video, EOIR, and other geo-wink capabilities that combine with GOTS data enterprises to connect the seams of the operating picture. And like the panel discussed earlier, the seams are where it starts getting a little complex. Next slide, please. So when connecting those seams, you develop what we call the end result. And that end result is an integrated mission solution for the next fight. The SIGINT solutions that you see here are what those examples are, and what is the latest example of what can be done when you are mission focused on today and tomorrow. As you see here, some of those examples, the scaled open architecture reconnaissance, rapid adaptable smart intelligence, surveillance and reconnaissance, and all those capabilities that can be combined in a podded platform agnostic package to also being integrated on platforms, whether that's a roll-on, roll-off capability or the like. This is what is going to be required for that next fight, to be able to keep that investment both on the government and on the industry side, and keep it moving at pace to support our warfighters in the field. This is going to be very important to provide that unprecedented availability and flexibility to deploy those customized full spectrum SIGINT solutions. Next slide, please. Now, in conclusion, L3 Harris is a leading aerospace and defense technology innovator. Now, our customers are first, always, and we are in the fight with them. Industry-leading R&D investment, innovative, affordable solutions delivered with agility, speed, and flawless precision. And a high-performance culture, which again, a lot of our panelists do. Diverse and inclusive work environments with career opportunities, committed to sustainability and supporting the community, especially in Virginia. Now, I invite you to check out the l3harris.com for the latest innovations and technologies across these multiple platforms and domains that L3 Harris supports and enables. Thank you very much for your time, and back to you, Ian.
Well, thank you, Nathan. I've got one question for you, and then when we've done that, we're going to try again with some of the videos from the panelists in the middle section here that we missed before. But I think this is such a great question that's come in from one of the audience members. You said that L3 Harris have been around for 69 years. That's fantastic. What's the next 69 years look like? You've given us the next 5 to 10 there with your integrations. What's the real long term?
Well, have you seen Minority Report? I was kidding. I mean, that's a great question. I mean, 69 years. If you think about the time scale of where we were in 1990, right, with cell phones, right, and where the iPhone is, and that's been what, maybe 20 years. So if you take that type of technology roadmap and multiply it by 3, that's probably where you're going to get. And that, I think, is going to be a very profound question, right? Because I, to be honest, can't answer that. I know that it will be definitely in that connected realm, right? That operational view that you showed there will probably be even more seamless than it is today. The crazy thing is the disparate infrastructure that we are currently working. And disparate, the definition of disparate is multiple individual things working by themselves and not working together. And that's hard, right? That problem is very difficult. And what I see as the Internet of Things, as Colonel Diller described earlier, that is probably where some of those more complicated systems will start ending up, right? But with that, then comes the other challenge, like the panelists discussed, trust, right? How do you trust an algorithm to make decisions for you? And that, I think, is where I believe the answers will be led to in the next 69 years, to then help with that mission system and data agnostic enterprise, and working and coupling with the human species to improve those capabilities, both in the data and the mission system. Over.
Thank you. I like that. I also like the Minority Report answer, I have to say. So there are other questions. There's a good old friend of mine lurking in the comments who's got a great one for you, but I'm going to let him ask those on the Hoover the Hoover chat afterwards. And I will see if the Fairfax Elves can get the other videos going again now. Would you like? Thank you very much for that, and we'll come back to you shortly after the videos. Thank you. That's a very nice video there. We will go next, if it's teed up, to a video from Joe's Drone Shield. Matt spoke to us earlier on. One of the smaller companies we've had on the conference today, but one that I've been watching closely and definitely want to watch for the future. So take it away with the Drone Shield video, please. Thank you. And then lastly, we will have the video from BAE Systems. I have to declare an interest in this one. They were my employer for 20 years, so a company I want to see do well, and I know are doing great things both on that side of the pond and in England where I am at the moment. Take it away with the BAE video, please.
For decades, we've stayed ahead of our adversaries because of the innovative minds who came before us, renowned for targeting the next challenges facing our servicemen and women and producing the most advanced electronic warfare systems. The world is changing. The future is interconnected, from the sea to the stars. The next generation of industry drives product velocity faster than ever before. Technology allows for immediate upgrades of products, and modular designs keep systems working longer. We're working alongside our stakeholders as partners in shaping the future of electronic warfare, enabling us to always be ahead of the next evolution of threats. We have a plan for next-generation advantages that detect, identify, locate, and eliminate evolving threats of the future, where our diverse and inclusive pool of talent utilizes the most advanced design and manufacturing approaches. With strategic locations and state-of-the-art facilities across the United States, BAE Systems is pioneering entirely new ways of designing products, making the difference on battlefields. And we are reimagining what it takes to innovate by integrating next-generation technology and processes into every phase of production. We are shaping the future of full-spectrum electronic warfare capabilities for both defense and attack applications through 2040 and beyond by implementing agile engineering, advanced manufacturing, and sustainment solutions. BAE Systems will create the market's fastest pathway from the lab to the field. Together with the U.S. Armed Forces and our allies, we are defending democracy around the globe.
Thank you. I'm glad those all worked at the end there. So it now leaves it for me to, first of all, point you to the Hoover app. As we finish here, if you go over there, many of our panelists and will be around to do Q&A in sort of chat rooms over there. It works well. We've done it on the last couple of sessions, and it's been great. So please, I do encourage you to go over there and ask any questions you've not been able to ask so far. For me, can I say thank you to today's panelists, to Nathan for our keynote speech. That was great, and thank you to Colonel Diller. Fascinating insight into AFWorks at the beginning. I think I misspoke. I said he was going to be in the Q&A. I believe his staff have had to whisk him away to the next event. But if you would like to either email us with questions or to put the questions in the Hoover app in the general chat there, I'll make sure they're collated and we'll see if we can pass them to Colonel Diller and his team for answers. So thank you to all our innovation speakers today as well. Fascinating stuff. I've thoroughly enjoyed it. I hope the people, the rest of you who attended have. I can see people are leaving and going over to Hoover as we speak. It's been a great series. We've had 3 fascinating sessions: air innovation, on UAVs and flying cars and so on. A lot of great stuff on novel space a couple of weeks ago, and finally defense today. Any feedback on any of those? Anything that attendees would like to see do different, do better, do more of from Fairfax County Economic Development Authority's position? I'd love to say, just give us that feedback. We'll take it and we'll do what we can to help companies in our area, in Fairfax, in Northern Virginia, in the DC area, and companies that are thinking of coming here. Can I thank you all for coming, and can I thank, please, especially the the folks behind the scenes who don't present this, but who are the folks who actually make this stuff work, getting the technology up and going. And with that, I'll say thank you, and wherever you are, thanks for coming, and bye-bye.